Hey everyone, we just picked up this really cool new home theatre system and I'm going to set it up for you today in this video. For a while now we've had this LG BX 65-inch OLED TV, which is just an amazing TV. Everything looks super cool, got really good blacks. And so we thought it'd be really good to get a home theatre system to go along with it, enhance the audio and hopefully get a Dolby Atmos like experience. So I've gone ahead and picked up a whole bunch of different things. The first thing is this KEF T-Series speaker system. The T-Series is like a very thin speaker panel, so they just kind of sit on the wall and sit up quite flush against the wall, similar to probably how thin the TV is actually. I picked up this system because I really didn't want big, obtrusive, obnoxious looking speakers. I just wanted something that would blend in with the rest of the room. But the speakers are still big enough and kind of high quality enough to provide a really good sound, especially in this small space just here. So that's the KEF T101 and the 101C, which is the center speaker, which is just the same as the left and right speakers, but has the logo rotated because you've got it horizontally. We've got the KEF T2 subwoofer here. Funny story about this, when I pulled it out by the plastic and the speaker fell out of the plastic onto my toe, which resulted in me having to do an X-ray today. Pretty random. Moving right along, we've got some speaker cable. We've got 14 gauge speaker cable, 50 meters. And then I'll explain why I need so much in a second. We've got the Marantz NR1711 receiver. This is actually a half height receiver. And with that comes a few small drawbacks like less power per channel of the amplifier. But given we're in quite a small room here, that didn't really matter for me. And I really like the look of this receiver. Importantly, this receiver also has supports 4K 120 Hz, like HDMI 2.1, which a lot of receivers don't. But because we've got the 4K OLED which supports that, I want to have a receiver that can support that as well. Has a whole bunch of other features as well, which I'm sure we'll go through later in this video. And then finally, we've got two speakers over here. They're the Audio Dimension C305s or something like that. I'll overlay that on the video. But they're in-ceiling speakers and they'll be used for the Dolby Atmos height channels. Finally, we've got two more of the KEF T101s, but they're for the rear of the room. So in total, we've got 7 speakers. We're gonna have 5 speakers around ear level for the surround and then 2 speakers mounted in the ceiling for Dolby Atmos. I've also got a whole bunch of banana plugs, which is what you use to put on the end of the speaker cable to plug it in instead of having to fiddle around with wires. I got a wall plate to run all the cables, so you can just plug them into the wall and have them go off instead of just running cables directly, which is a little bit neater, I think. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get started with installing all this. I've been super excited to set this all up. And yeah, come along for the ride and hopefully you'll learn some things as well. So the first thing we're going to want to do is get our receiver out. So as I was saying before, this is the Marantz NR1711. And this is basically the hub of your home theatre system, so you want to get this, get this one right. There's so many different features available with these, how many HDMI inputs you can get, how many audio channels it can power, how many watts it is, what streaming services it supports. There's, and plus the design is important. There's many to pick from. Marantz is generally pretty good. Denon's also owned by the same company. There's a good subreddit, maybe I'll link that down below, listing a whole bunch of amplifier and receiver recommendations. This is the one I've gone with. I think it's pretty cool. It's got Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, HEOS, which is it's kind of like Sonos, but you can integrate your own speakers. Just heaps and heaps of different features. So find out what's important to you and make sure you get a receiver that supports it. Let's go ahead and pop that in. I've got some things behind it, so that's not sliding in as well as I'd like, but there we go, it's in. All right, so we're at the back of the receiver here, and it looks kind of overwhelming because there's a whole bunch of different cables to plug in. I'm going to start with kind of what I've already got here and set as much up as I can before we need to go and start wiring the room for the surround sound speakers. So the first thing I've got here is these 2 antennas. They just came in the Marantz box. These are just used for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and they just simply screw in like this. Generally, if you look online, people like to just point them directly up. Probably doesn't really matter, but it's going to do that. I'm probably actually just going to hardwire with the network anyway, so this is just for Bluetooth. Comes with two other antennas. You've got this, this is an AM antenna, so if you want to listen to AM radio, you can use this one. This is very old school. I'm probably not going to plug this in because I've never listened to AM radio in my life. And this is an FM transmitter or listener. I'm probably also not going to use this, but there's a higher chance I'll listen to this. Cool, so the next thing I'm going to plug in is internet. So I've got this very short Cat6 cable. Just going to go ahead and plug it into the switch on top. All right, so what we want to do next is plug in all our inputs. So it's just got a whole bunch of HDMI ports on the back to plug in, Xboxes, Blu-ray players, whatever. So I've got a couple of different things here. This first one is the Apple TV. So we can plug that in. There's a few different kind of labels. So you can configure all this in the software, but it's got some kind of labels on the back here, so you can kind of tell what's plugged into what. Because this is an Apple TV, I'm going to go ahead and plug it into the media player plug. And we've got another one here, which I believe is the Xbox One S. So I'm going to put that into the game port. I've actually also got a PlayStation 5, which you're going to need to get a HDMI 2.1 cable, because that's the only device that can do 4K 120Hz. And that goes into this input, this 8K input. So when you see 8K written, that's the same, generally referring to the same thing as 4K 120Hz. It requires a similar kind of bit rate. So yeah, if you're not sure which port is the 4K 120Hz port, it's generally the one that's marked 8K. I guess all the manufacturers just want to get into the 8K trend. I guess the next thing to do is just plug in power, so let's go ahead and do that. There we go, got that in. I'm probably actually going to unplug this when I run all the speakers. You don't want power running while you're plugging in things. But just for now, we can see if it's all working. All right, so the next thing we want to do is install this wall plate. The wall plate is a 3-gang wall plate, which means it's takes up the spot of 3 switches. And it comes with this 3-gang plaster mounting thing. So what happens is you put that in your wall and then cut the hole, and then as you drill in, it closes these screws to mount onto the wall. So what we want to do is just go ahead and trace a hole to actually work out where this hole is going to go. So I've got some ports here, so I'm just going to put it to the right over here. I'm just going to really make sure it's straight. I'm just going to trace out in the middle. I think that's probably the best way of doing it. So probably want it maybe this high. Let's make sure it's level. I've definitely made that mistake before. So I've done kind of a rough drawing, but basically that's the area that I need to start cutting out. Get this installed, and then I'll be able to install all my wall plugs and run all the speaker cables to here. So let's go ahead and do that. Basically got a really big drill bit on the drill to start a pilot hole, and then I'll get a saw out basically to cut the rest of the hole. So what I want to do here is get a rough measure of how long the speaker cables need to be to go to the speakers across the room. Because I really don't want to do this multiple times, what I want to do is get all the speakers cables that need to go to the back of the room, which is what I'm feeding up now. I want to basically get them all taped to the end of this fish tape. And then what I can do is then just push that at one time, grab all 4 cables, or all 4 cables to go to the back of the room. And then I don't need to do this fish tape maneuver a whole bunch of times. I've just got the cables ready. It's just really important to get those lengths right and probably add a couple of meters to each length, because you can always go shorter, but you can't go longer. So let's work this out. So we're starting down here at the bottom where we made that hole just then. And we just kind of want to see how tall it is to the roof. So it's about here. Whoop. So it's about 2 meters there. So the next thing we want to do is get the length of the room. All right, so we've got about 4.5 meters. And then it'll probably be another 2 meters down to that side. So 2 meters, 2 meters, 4 meters, 4 plus 4.5 meters, about 8.5 meters for those 2 back cables. So I probably maybe want to make it about 10, 11 meters for each of those, just accounting for any parts where we need to, recut the cable at the end, or we've got some, thing we need to go around in the ceiling. So yeah, let's do 2 cables that are like 10 or 11 meters. The other thing I want to do is run these in-ceiling speakers. Obviously the cables for them can stay in the roof. They don't need to go back down the wall again. So that's about 6.5 meters per speaker. I'll probably just end up making 4 10-meter cables or 4 12-meter cables because I don't want to, run out and not have enough cable. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so what I'm doing here is just making 4, probably 2 12-meter cables and 2 10-meter cables. I got a 50-meter cable here, so that ends up with about 44 meters, so I have 6 meters left to do the other 3 speakers at the front here, but they're not very long distances. So let's go ahead and make our 12-meter cables. Just going to set out a tape measure so I can measure. All right, so I'm going to interject with a few little parts sitting at my desk here as I edit this, because I realized I didn't exactly film everything. So what I did here was got the tape measure and set out 1 meter, and then basically got the cable and just ran it across it as many times as I needed to create the lengths of the cables. So I've got my fish tape here, and what I want to do is attach each of the 4 cables that I've just made to this. So when I thread it up through the roof, we can, end up with all the cables up in the roof somewhere. So what I've done on each cable is basically measured out the length it needs to be. So for the 2 rear speakers, I've gone 11 meters, and the ones in the ceiling, I've gone 9.5 meters. And then I've just labeled on each one the length of the cable so I don't get confused, and then also where I want the cable to end up with. So I've got surround left and surround right, SL, SR, and I've got AL and AR for Atmos left and Atmos right. So let's go ahead and attach all this cables basically just to the end here. So it's going to be a huge mess of cables basically, and it's going to be a little bit tricky, but it'll make it easier later on so we don't have to do this same process a whole bunch of times. So I've got all my cables there. Let's tie that on so it travels nicely. All right, and now let's get that into the wall. Cool, so that was a bit of an effort, but what we just did was got the fish tape, and obviously we taped all the cables to it. We pushed that through this hole here, which pushed it up through the wall, and we actually tried to get it in a hole here at where the downlight comes out. So I took the downlight out and got my hand in there. It was a little bit tricky getting around the bend here. What we ended up doing was use a fish tape, like from one end, getting pushed. Then we just got a coat hanger with a hook at the end, untied it all, and used the coat hanger to kind of grab onto that fish tape and pull it around the bend of the wall into the ceiling. So what we're going to do now is push that fish tape basically from where it is now all the way through to the back of the room and start mounting our ceiling mounted speakers. So the next thing I wanted to do was cut the holes for the in-ceiling speakers. This meant that I'd have big holes at the back of the room and I'd be able to actually grab the speaker cables as I push them through the roof. So not only can I install the speakers there, but I can also use the holes that I'm cutting for the speakers to help me get the cables to the back of the room. All right, so what we want to do here is mount these in the ceiling. These are pretty cool. They've kind of got a similar mechanism to the 3-gang plate over there, in that what you do is once you start screwing, these red like toggle things go down, and they've got like a kind of a textured spot there, and that will grip into the ceiling, basically just set it flush against the ceiling, which is really cool. So what we're going to do is kind of mount these just slightly in front of where we're sitting. In an ideal world, if we had like a home theater or something, we'd have the couch probably in the middle of the room. We'd have these just slightly in front of the middle of the room, but here we've got the couch at the back. So what I'm going to do is probably put this about here, I reckon, and do the other one. So I'm just going to measure the, I'm just going to put this in, sorry, and then measure the one on the opposite side just based on where this ends up being. Luckily, this company PSB Speakers gives us this really handy template, so I can basically just stick this template somewhere up there, trace around, cut around that, and that really should be all I have to do. So let's go ahead and do that. So we just want it, I reckon, just there. Doesn't really matter if it's straight or not because it's a circle anyway. I think that's pretty good. That's just slightly in front. Nice and wide too, so we get a good left and right separation. And let's trace around that. Gotta say, this is way easier than installing that 3-gang plate that we did just before. There we go. So much pain and sweat later, we finally cut these 2 holes in the ceiling according to the template that we were given. Basically what we did was drill 1 pilot hole with a really big drill bit to basically be able to fit the plaster knife. And then we just put the plaster knife in and cut in a circle. We actually, because we don't really know what's in the ceiling here, what we did is cut like a hole big enough to just fit my phone in and put my phone in, turn the torch on, and like had a look what was there. So for example here, we found one of the beams was right there, like the steel beams that holds up the ceiling. So obviously we couldn't put the speaker there. So we worked, like luckily we cut in the right spot and worked out we could just kind of move from where we originally marked the hole that way a little bit to be not where the beam is. Over there we didn't have any problems, it was right in the middle, which was awesome. We did have one other hole over here. So basically this back wall, we want the surround left and right speaker cables to come through this back wall. But at the kind of top of the wall within the ceiling, the wall kind of continues. So we needed to drill a hole through that, and it was very hard to drill a hole without another hole to get in there. We've done that. Hopefully we'll be able to get some cables through there and not have to run any cables across the room. So I guess our next step now is to go back to the original hole where we were feeding through the fish tape and try and get it from there over to there and here as well. So let's go ahead with that. Okay, cool. So now we finally got the cable to the Atmos right speaker here. So way earlier before, when I taped all these cables together to the fish wire, you can see they've come through here now. So we've gone all the way across to here. So what I'm gonna do now, because I really still just want this hole, I suspect I want this hole to be able to run other cables. So I'm gonna get the Atmos right cable, which is this one, and remove this from the bundle and then just like leave this hanging out, or maybe just tape this here. And then I can continue with the other wiring, and then once I've got all the wires in place, then I'll start mounting all the speakers. So what I didn't show in that video was after I took out that 1 cable for the Atmos right speaker, I then fed the other 3 cables over to the Atmos left speaker. I did this because there's an air conditioning unit right behind my head on the right hand side if you're looking at the TV. And there was a whole bunch of things in the ceiling there, which meant it was impossible to get cables to that back wall from that angle. So what I needed to do was pass the cables over to the other side of the room, grab them there, and then push them, to the back wall. And there was there was still obstacles in the way, but less obstacles in the way, so I could start to feed that cable down the back wall. So it's the next day. I didn't want to wake up all the neighbors doing drilling and stuff last night. Basically what we're going to do is wire up this speaker. So this is one of the in-ceiling speakers, pops up in there. It's the Atmos right height speaker. Luckily this cable's quite long, so we can bring it down to where I am here and work on this bench as opposed to having to fiddle around in the roof. So what we want to do is get these wires in these terminals here. So we've got a black for negative, red for positive. Now wire is also labeled similar, so you can see it's red on one side and not red on the other side, so that's black. And we just want to get the wires in there. So the first thing to do is split the wires a little bit. So they're all joined together. We just want to disconnect them a little bit. It'll make it a little bit easier to get them in the separate holes. Then there's a plastic coating around this wire that we want to take off to be able to get good wire contact between the wire and then the terminal here. We don't need it to be too long because, as you can see with the wire here, it doesn't go too deep. So let's go ahead and get our wire cutters here. I've got these ones. This is a 14 gauge wire, but we don't want to cut the whole wire. We just want to cut the outer sheathing. So I'm going to 12 gauge. I found that to be a pretty good kind of spot to just cut the plastic. You can see there's different size holes there. Basically, I just want to cut just the plastic and not the actual wire itself. So let's get that in the 12 gauge hole, probably about, I don't know, about that much. Should be enough wire. I found you should be able to spin it around, but this one kind of gets caught. So what I'm doing is just like opening and closing it as I spin around and getting the wire, just so I can cut all that plastic sheathing off the wire. It's kind of a little bit fiddly, this process, so just be prepared to do a whole bunch of different tries. May or may not have done that myself. Anyway, now that we've cut all that, we should just be able to kind of get our fingernail in there and pull it off. This can sometimes take some time just to get right in, but eventually it'll come off. And I can see I'm pulling it off here. be prepared to have sore fingernails at the end of that. There we go, I've got it off. So I'll just pull that sheathing off. You can see the wires exposed there now. I want to do the same on the other side. Let's just get that same thing again. 12 gauge, about the same height. Grab those. And then same thing, just like, you know, slowly putting little clamps around it to ensure that we cut the whole plastic sheathing, because there's nothing more annoying than missing a part and having to fight it. There we go, got that one off. So now you can see we've got our both red and black wire exposed there. What we want to do is just twist that, get it nice and tight so it's easy to thread into the terminal on the speaker. Same with the other side. Basically what we want to do is get the minimum amount of wire here exposed to be able to get a good connection with the terminal. If we're exposing too much wire, we're going to get more interference, potential of the wires touching each other, which is not good at all. But here we've got a small amount, but it should be enough to get in those terminals. So now for the red, just push down this terminal, that'll kind of release a hole for you. I'm just going to have to pull a little bit more out, tie that up. Push that nice and tight in there, that's good. And let's get this black one in. There we go, we've got a really good connection there, and we're not seeing any of the wire kind of beyond the terminal itself. So we know they're not going to touch with each other or interfere, and it looks really clean. So that's pretty much it for the wiring of this speaker. Cool, so now that we've wired our speaker, what we want to do is get it into the ceiling. This speaker's pretty good because it's got these red toggles here. So what happens is there's a screw here. When you screw that screw, this slowly comes down, or sticks out, slowly comes down and grabs onto your ceiling. So basically once I get it in the hole, as long as I drill these 4 screws, it'll just attach and it shouldn't go anywhere. So let's go ahead and get this in the ceiling, get all that cable up there first. Sometimes it can just kind of fit just like that, but I'm a little bit worried of it falling out. And there we go. Cool, and the final step is just to attach this magnetic grill. Super easy, just grab it and pop it on. It's magnetic, looks pretty cool. So one problem we've ran into is just because of the nature of the roof, we found there's a few more obstacles than we were otherwise expecting. So the original cable that we measured for the furthest away speaker, which is the surround right, the cable wasn't long enough. This isn't actually that much of a problem. What you can do is basically get an additional length of cable. So I've added another 2 meters on here, and I've stripped back the wires similar to how we attach that speaker, except this time I've just attached the wire to the wire. So going red to red, black to black. And I've got what's called heat shrink. So this is this like tubing, and if you apply heat, it shrinks in on the cable. So what I'm going to do is do 2 bits of heat shrink, one on the positive, one on the negative, and then I'm going to put this one just over the top, just, I don't know, for good measure because it's going in the wall. Let's go ahead and get those set up now. You just want them sitting, you know, over where you're trying to join. Got this heat gun here. Let's try it. So there you go, you can see those two have pretty well fused together. There we go, that's pretty good. That's not going to be coming apart, so that's the most important part. Be able to chuck this in the wall and hopefully get the last speaker set up. So this next part I didn't film because it was already pretty tricky and I felt like you're not really going to be able to see what I was trying to talk about. But I'll give you a quick rundown in that we kind of had the speakers hanging out of the ceiling. We needed to get them to the back wall. This is pretty tricky. You'll notice that square hole that I was talking about before. We needed that to kind of cut through this bit of wood that was above the wall in the ceiling, which we wouldn't have been able to get the cable through unless I cut a hole there to be able to drill a hole through that piece of wood. Did that, pushed the cables down to the bottom. There was actually insulation in this wall, which was a bit tricky, so I just basically put a glove on and stuck and cut a hole down the bottom of the wall. I really didn't want to cut any additional holes, but I knew it was going to be impossible to do this without doing that. So cut a small hole at the bottom of the wall, stuck my hand in with a glove on through the insulation, and actually grabbed the fish wire with the 2 speaker cables attached to it. And then I had at the back of the wall, which I'll show you in a second how I actually mounted the speaker, but I had two small circular holes for the cables to come through for the speakers on either side on the rear wall. So then what I did on that side where we passed through the cables, I got it up with a coat hanger again and just fished it through that little small hole and got the cable for the rear left speaker there. So finally we just had to do the rear right speaker. This was a lot more tricky. There was a whole bunch of obstacles in the wall, so I ended up having to cut like 4 or 5 holes along the wall just to get that cable through to the other side. I guess perks, or maybe not perks, of living in an apartment is there was kind of these steel or aluminium kind of metal beams along the way, so I couldn't just push it straight because it kept hitting these. I needed to actually get in and like manually route it around that intrusion. And then at one point the ceiling stops being kind of hollow with insulation and starts just having a like a concrete wall, and then that's the drywall. So there's only a little bit of space between the concrete and the drywall to get the cable through. So that was another tricky thing that we had to cut a hole for. Finally, once I got it over to the right side, then I was able to do the same thing, coat hanger method, and just push it up to where the hole was in the, where we actually wanted the speaker, as opposed to at the bottom. And then once that was pretty much all done, I installed the 2 speakers at the rear, installed the 2 speakers in the roof, and then I went to the front of the room and did kind of the same thing. We need to get the speaker wall mounted in the center, and then the 2 ones left of the TV. Tried to get them equal distance apart from the TV, and then basically just used a whole bunch of holes that already existed to try and feed the cable through. Within that internal wall, there were these aluminium kind of beams, or maybe steel beams, holding up the wall, and they're basically solid the whole way. So if you imagine that's the wall, like one side of the wall and the other side of the wall, that's the beam like that, right in the way. So impossible to get cable through. Luckily through these beams, there's a whole bunch of small circles like that the whole way up. So every time we kind of cut a new hole, we were able to kind of find one of these and route it through. It was still pretty tricky to get the cables through. We ended up having to like take off. There was a power point on the other side of the wall that we're able to kind of see in through once we took that out. And then on the left side, we kind of had the same thing. We had a power point on the other side of the wall that we're able to use to kind of guide the cable through. But it was a lot of mucking around. Definitely would have been easier probably just to cut some extra holes in the wall, but we didn't want to have to do that and, replaster some more holes on top of what we already had. So fiddled around with that for a while, and just with a combination of the fish tape and coat hangers and putting your phone in the wall with the torch on and filming, we were kind of able to get all the cables, the left, the right, and the center cable through the wall back down to where I installed that wall plate. So we've done quite a bit since I last updated you. We've got the back 2 speakers mounted, which is super cool. We've got the 2 ceiling speakers done. Everything at the back of the room is pretty much done, except for just replastering. But I thought I'd show you how to actually mount the speaker to the wall. So these KEF T101s come with this template, which is just a bit of paper which you can use, cut little holes in it to work out where you need to put the screws, these 4 holes, as well as this hole for the cables. These speakers have very particularly inline cables, like very flat cables, so you can't have like a wall plate or anything behind. They just need the cable to come out directly out of the wall. So if you see here, if I line it up here, just like that, take it away, you can see I've got 4 holes here, and then plus the hole for the cable. So that corresponds to this mounting bracket. So you can either mount the speaker directly onto the wall, or you can use this mounting plate, which I think is way easier. So you can see those holes, they correspond with these holes here, and then these 2 things that are sticking out here, you can then just mount the speaker on. So the first thing you're going to want to do is, like if you're like me, you've got plaster or drywall, you want to put in some drywall anchors to make sure that your speaker's not going anywhere. So let's go ahead and drill those holes for the drywall anchors. Here we go, and get our little drywall bits. It's these ones. And we wanted to stick them in the wall. You can use a hammer. Sometimes you can just push them in. I'm hoping I can just push them in. I'll use a hammer for the rest of it. Sometimes if you hammer too early, it crushes it's just plastic, so it squishes it all up. So I like to just get it most of the way in just with my finger. That makes sure you've got the right sized hole. If we just get the world's biggest hammer here. Cool, so that's fully in. Now we want to get our plate. We've got some screws. Just quickly change my drill bit. And you want the hole at the bottom, obviously, and get the cable through before you start drilling, otherwise you're gonna have a rough time. And you want these like divot things sticking out so you can actually mount the speaker. So it wouldn't screw on very well if you didn't have them sticking out. Now let's go, let's get that lined up. Normally I don't tighten them all like the first one, the full way. I like to get them all four in, and then I'll tighten them afterwards, because sometimes it can be uneven, or you just don't want unequal pressure, like warping one side of the whatever you're screwing really. Here we go, got that nice and secure on there, looks pretty nice. So the next thing we want to do is attach our cable to the speaker. Luckily we've got quite a bit of cable here, so a lot to play with. So similar to before, the first thing I like to do is just cut off like a little bit off the end. You know, that's the bit that's been like fished through the wall. So let's get rid of that. I worked out something cool with these. So firstly, let's just split this cable just so it's a little bit easier to work with. Scissors just work best here, I've found. There we go, got them split. And I found with this tool, you can just kind of, same thing, so little in and out motions going around the, around the cable to cut the plastic sheathing properly. And then if you just kind of hold it together and pull away from the cable, it just pulls it off like that, which is pretty nice. Although, cut the cable. Do the same thing with the other side. There we go, we just want to twirl them up so they're really easy to put into our speaker. And here we've got the speaker. We've got two little Allen key hot screws here. What they do is, if you look in there, they basically release this screw, which lets you put the cable in, and then you tighten it over, which tightens the screw back on top of the cable and secures it in. So let's go ahead and undo them. Grab our speaker wire. Just gonna put the red in like that. Get our Allen key back. Right at the end, I like to twist it the other way just to get a little bit of extra like torque and secure it in. Same thing with the black wire. Sometimes the wires kind of fray like that. You can just re-twist them around again. There we go. So that's our speaker, fully wired, ready to go. Just thread that cable back through the wall a little bit. And this has kind of just some mounting mechanisms. So let's just jump that on there. There we go. We've got our right speaker set up. Take that sticker off right at the end. I then went ahead and installed the center speaker and the left speaker much the same way. Cool, so we've got all our wires coming out here now, and it's a little bit of a mess. We've got a whole bunch coming through here, which I can probably attach on that cable, and then we've got some other ones which we've just ran just here, these front three, which are these ones just here. So fortunately what I did beforehand was I labeled everything. So each end I labeled, like for example, this is the left speaker. And so that makes it really easy now to know which cables correspond to which speakers. I picked up these things. This is this wall plate, which you can find on Amazon or your local electronics store. Basically this screws into this 3-gang wall plate here, which will just stick in the wall. And then these go in here on the other side. You get 3 of them. You can get these for all different types of connections, but I've got them for here. What I'm going to do is attach the back of the, so on the back, I'm going to attach each of the wires that are coming out of the wall to this, and then that leaves at the front a really, really clean looking connection point for anyone to just plug in their receiver. So obviously, I'm only setting up this receiver now, but if I was to, for example, sell this house and come away later, it's not going to be a big hole in the wall with a whole bunch of cables coming out. It's going to be a really nice looking thing. It also helps you with troubleshooting. If you've got a speaker that's not working, it's really easy to work out which connection it is if the cords come loose, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing this now, and yeah, hopefully it doesn't take too long. The other thing I need to do then is create a whole bunch of cables between the front of this and then the receiver just there. So I bought a whole bunch of banana plugs. I've got some spare leftover cable. I should be able to do that as well. So let's get started. Alright, so we've just made all these cables. That was a pretty time-intensive process, so didn't feel the need to film these because I feel like you should probably just go out and buy cables yourself. Anyway, we've made them. There's a lot of, blood, sweat and tears went into these, so it's a little bit satisfying. Anyway, let's go ahead and plug them in. So I've got 7 cables here, and the Marantz receiver came with a whole bunch of labels. So what I'm going to do is just label like the side of that I'm going to plug into the receiver. So I'm going to plug one end into the thing and then label the other end of the cable with like what I'm plugging into the receiver, and then it'll just be easy to troubleshoot problems, things like that later on. So I guess the first one to start with is front left. So let's go ahead and grab that one. So then I just went ahead and plugged in all the different speaker cables. The cables were too short to actually film behind the entertainment unit, but the shorter the cable, the neater it looks when you actually push the entertainment unit up against the wall. So that's why I did that. Just one thing to bear in mind, the banana plugs aren't a very secure connection. So just make sure they're in fully because it's very easy for them to come out. So finally here we got the sub. Interestingly, the subwoofer here has its ports underneath. So let's go ahead and get into them. Just got a couple of ports, got the line in, so I'm going to use this subwoofer cable and then just power. It's a couple of different settings. Bass boost, I'm just going to leave that at 0. We can always control that in the receiver if we need to. Phase shift, this is if you had like 2 different subwoofers and they were both colliding, like their sound waves were colliding with each other, you could go to 180. And power mode, auto and manual. So auto leaves like when it stops receiving signal, it turns the sub off and then turns it back on when it starts receiving signal. Manual, you've got to manually turn off and on. I'm gonna leave it in auto because it's good to save power. I'm gonna plug this into the subwoofer 1 input at the back here. One thing to note with this receiver is the subwoofer 1 and the subwoofer 2 outputs both just output the same signal, so you can't have them like tuned separately or anything like that. So let's plug in subwoofer 1. Plug that in. It's a tight fit. There we go. And the power cable. And I'm gonna flick that on. Let's sit that the right way up. There we go. Push this to the back. There we go, let's get set up. All right, so we've just turned it on. Let's select the language. I've never done this before, so not really sure what the settings are. This is saying, welcome. Here's all the things in the box. Speaker setup, let's do that. Place each of the speakers. Yep, I know all about speaker position. I know about this. Done this, we've connected everything already. Yep. We do have a center speaker. Yep. We do have surround speakers. Yep. So we do have a Dolby Atmos, basically front. We just got Dolby Atmos enabled speakers, so I'm just going to hit no on the surround speakers. Front height speakers. No, we don't have front height, but we do have height speakers. Top front. I guess you'd call them top front. Maybe more top middle. Yeah, so we've kind of got top middle, which is where we're sitting. So I'm going to hit yes on that. Connect those. Yep, already done. I do have a subwoofer. Yep. There's our speaker system, front, center, subwoofer, surround, top, middle. Cool. That kind of looks like our setup here. Now they're going to play a test tone on each speaker. This is the first time we've used the speakers, so hopefully they work because we spent ages running the cables. Subwoofer's turned on. Yep. Yep, we can hear that. Yep, I can hear the center. Oh, yep, I can hear the right. That's this back one. Yep, we can hear that. Ah, looks like I plugged it into the wrong one. That's coming out of this one, so I'm gonna have to fix that. Now we should be hearing this one. Yep. And now this one. All right, so other than one slight misplug, we're looking pretty good. So cool, now that we've done that. Oh, and we can hear the subwoofer too. Pretty bass heavy. I guess you'd expect that from a sub. Speaker calibration. I am just going to skip this for the moment. I'm going to go ahead and do this afterwards. I might fix up that, you know, the plug thing. Antenna connection. Already done the antennas. Feel that right at the start. There you go. Stick them up exactly like we did. Network setup. Yep, already plugged into Ethernet. There you go. We can hear some random internet radio. That's good. Please select a name for your device. For Alexa, I'm just going to call it living room because we're in the living room here. Do you want to enable network control? Yep, that'll be good. Auto updates? Yep. Time zone. We're in the old +10. So we're Australian Eastern. TV's audio. Yep, so ARC or ARC, that if you use like a TV app like Netflix or something on your TV, it can return audio back to the receiver, so you can use the surround sound even when your TV is generating the content. Yep, we want to enable that. Input setup. Yeah, we can do that. Select one, select, this should be the Apple TV. Back a step. Oh yeah, Apple TV is like a media player. So let's go HDMI. Yep, we've done that. Should be turned on. Let's just turn it on from my phone, the Apple TV. And I'll hit next. There we go, there's the Apple TV coming through the receiver. Pretty cool. Media player input, living room AP. Living room Apple TV. I'm just gonna leave it as media player for now and probably rename it to Apple TV later. I do have some other devices, so I'm gonna skip them for now and come back later. Usage data and some mobile apps, we can do that later. Setup assistant completed. So I'm super jazzed about this. I can't believe all the speakers worked then. That was super cool. Where cameraman behind the camera is smiling a lot as well, which is good because we spent a lot of time doing this. So yeah, we'll probably do an audio calibration now and you know, run that, get that speaker fixed up, and then probably try a movie or try some music or something. I don't know, world's our oyster. Cool, so here we've got the Odyssey mic. So what this is it's designed to replicate where your ears sit. It runs a whole bunch of different test tones, different sounds through the receiver, and automatically calibrates how each of the speakers should sound relative to each other. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this. It does come with a cardboard stand that you can use to hold it, but I've got this light stand, which is just like a lot more flexible. And it should actually be at ear height. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop it down. So that's about ear height when we're sitting on the couch. I've also got it behind the couch because normally the couch is actually in this position, but we've just got to fill all these I know, plaster holes. So anyway, we've got that there. Let's go ahead and run that. So it's been about a week since I filmed that, and since then I ended up getting the holes replastered in the wall. I actually ended up just getting someone in to do that because I really couldn't be bothered to replaster the 5 or 6 holes that we cut. And definitely recommend that. Jump on like Airtasker or Craigslist or something, and just you can find someone to do it. It's not really that expensive and just saves you a lot of effort. So end up getting all those holes replastered, pushed the couch back against the wall, and I reran Odyssey because I wanted to get it, you know, with the exact setup that we ended up having. So what Odyssey does is plays this sound out of each speaker for 6 different listening positions. So you need to move that microphone 6 times. And then it kind of works out for each speaker how loud it needs to be compared to the other speakers, and then also how far away or how long it takes the sound to travel. So it can add a little bit of delay to each of the speakers based on where you're sitting. You know, if you got a speaker 4 meters away versus a speaker 1 meter away, the 1 meter is going to hit you marginally faster than the 4 meters. So it needs to delay that, you know, the one that 1 meters away to account for the one that's further away. So I ran that a whole, like a couple of times in the 6 different positions with the couch pushed back against the wall, and then trying on a couple of different positions on the couch. And then in the week since, I've listened to some music on Dolby Atmos, which is on Tidal. You can listen to Dolby Atmos music. I watched Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2, which is just amazing for both the visual experience as well as, you know, a whole Dolby Atmos surround sound. And I've basically just tried every other type of content. I've tried YouTube videos, sports, pretty much everything. And I'm just blown away. It just sounds so great. Super cool. Even just listening to those Dolby Atmos demos that you can find on like the Xbox app. There's like an Xbox app called Dolby Atmos. You can just play these demos and it just sounds like there's like birds up there, and then there's birds like over there, and then they're in front of you, and then they're back behind you. And listening to like Guardians of the Galaxy or even like Captain America Civil War, scenes where there's fighting or, you know, jets or spaceships or anything like that. They just sound so cool, and you literally just sound like you're like in the middle of, you know, the movie. So I'm sure I'll do some more testing and more thorough review, you know, give some more insights into how the speakers sound, how the receiver sounds, the different, you know, equalization settings that I've set up. But just, you know, from start to finish, I'm so happy with how we were able to set this up. Running all the cables through the wall, that was by far the most difficult part, and I'm really happy we're able to do that. And if you look now, there's literally, you can't see a single cable. It's just, you know, very, very well hidden, I think. And even just having the speakers that we chose, because they're so low profile, you can hardly tell they're on the wall because they're in white as well. And then the 2 ceiling ones pretty much flush as well. So you're getting this great 5.1.2 surround sound Dolby Atmos system in just a regular living room in my apartment, which I think is super cool. My main priorities basically were, you know, I wanted an upgrade from the speakers in the TV, which we've got. And I've got this Dolby Atmos, you know, height-based, object-based surround sound system literally just in my living room, which I think is super cool. So if you like this video and you want to hear more about, you know, my home theater or any of the equipment in the video, or how I set it up or how I calibrate it or anything, drop this video a like and leave a comment. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, thanks for coming along. I know this is like a very, very long video, so if you stuck through to the end, thank you for that. And subscribe to Technologetic.